For if you miss class for any reason, usually the same day that class is held, the video is up there, and I'll post a link to the particular playlist that these will be in later. So page 1383, look, you've got two bold-faced words, playwright and plays. Everybody knows what a playwright is. Why? Because the word tells you what it is. Person who writes plays. Okay, so plays. What are plays? How are plays different than novels? Okay, they're performed. Do you have plays that aren't performed? Yeah. One of the terms that's going to come up next page, closet drama. Closet drama is a play that is not written to actually be performed. It's a play written just to be read. Okay? So the next page, 1384, drama, okay, which simply means to do or to perform. All right? Script, everybody knows what that is. That's what the actors use to get their words, their parts, etc. for the play. Okay? Closet drama, I just talked about. That covers the backgrounds, okay, or that section, introduction to drama. So, skip over to 1401. We're not reading Gospels, trifles, so you have the elements of drama. Okay, I'm beginning 1401. You've got a whole bunch of bold-faced words there, or bold print words there. One-act play is exactly that. It is a play that occurs in one act. Well, what's an act? An act is a convention of drama that indicates a break. Okay? So you've got a break going on between one part of the play and another. Okay? These are the main divisions of a full-length play. Full-length play usually means not a one-act play. Full-length is typically going to be 5 acts. You see, any play by Shakespeare, they're all 5 acts. Well, with one exception, because he wrote one play that, for some reason, Shakespeare did not include any act or scene divisions. The whole play is kind of meant to go continuously. Antony and Cleopatra, okay? So, what's the difference between an act and a scene division? Typically, it's the way they are carried out on the stage. You have a different scene when somebody else enters or exits the stage. Those are scene divisions usually. An act change, okay, is not done by bringing down the curtain. Some productions it is. Usually an act division or an act change is when the stage is empty for a moment. It might be a brief moment, okay? But it'll be where everybody is left, and it might be the last person's heel has just left the stage, and somebody else comes in through another door. That kind of gives you an indication there's been a act change, okay? Convention. What does your book say a convention is? Okay? Acts and scenes are conventions that are understood and accepted by audiences because they've come to usage in time to be recognized as familiar techniques. A convention is something commonly accepted by everybody. Like, for example, it is a convention to say, this is an eraser. We could all agree this isn't an eraser, but this is a bottle. If we wanted to agree, that's what we are going to call it. That would be a convention. Similarly, we could, if we all agreed on it, call this thing a telephone. There's nothing telephonish about telephones. There's nothing whiteboardish about whiteboards other than it's white on a board. Okay? So those are all conventions that we use. What's next? Setting. It's pretty easy. What's the setting for this classroom? It's in the word, the classroom. So the setting for a play, Midsummer Night's Dream, actually is 2 of them. One is the city of Athens, and the other one is the wood outside Athens. The setting physically is the locale where the story, the play, the the poem possibly occurs. Okay? That's one component of setting. What's another component? Time. The time in which the play is set. Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream is set when? Is it set in, let's say, the time around when it was written, 1596 Athens? No. It's set in ancient Athens. How do you know? Because the characters in it, Theseus and Hippolyta, are characters of ancient Greek myth. There weren't any Amazonians living in 16th century Athens. Okay? Oedipus, the plays we will read by Sophocles, Oedipus and Antigone, are also set in ancient Greece. But we can read other plays today, like Gospels, Trifles, that are set kind of contemporaneous. Okay? So, place, time is a component of setting. What else?
Environment.
What do you mean by environment?
Social environment.
Okay, social environment, cultural environment. What is going on in the world at the time? That's not necessarily time. It's like the ideas that are rampant in the world. So, for example, in a few weeks, we will read a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. That short story is set in Puritan New England. Okay? The Puritan aspect of New England is really important there. Similarly, if you ever read The Scarlet Letter, which most of you had that inflicted upon you probably in high school. If you read The Scarlet Letter, what is one of the big components of that novel?
Religion.
How? I mean, you're right. It is religion. Not just religion amorphously. It's Christianity, right? It's Puritan Christianity. That's why the Scarlet A is so important. How would writing the Scarlet Letter and setting it in August 31st, 2018 make it different? The Scarlet A would not make any sense. Okay? Because there is not the social stigma today against adultery that there was in 1680s New England and such. Okay? Suspense. Everybody knows what suspense is, right? You go to a movie, you see the opening, few minutes of Jaws, and what do you hear? Dun-dun, dun. Just the music helps create suspense. Okay? Exposition. This is information you need to understand the story. Okay? Necessary background information about the characters and their circumstances. How many of you saw the Lord of the Rings films? Either when they came out or on video. A few of you did. You get at the very beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, I don't remember how long it is because I hate them. I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes of exposition. How does that occur? You hear a voice, and the voice tells you a bunch of stuff, and you see things on the screen. You're not hearing the voice from the people on the screen. It's Kate Blanchett, aka Galadriel, narrating the history of the ring. Okay? In Tolkien's novel, that exposition comes in two places. The second chapter of the first part of Book 1, and the second Book 1 meaning the Fellowship of the Ring, and the second chapter of the second part of Book 1. Okay? The first chapter is called The Shadow of the Past, and the second one is called The Council of Elrond. It's at those two chapters that Tolkien just unloads all kinds of background history. Why? Because if we don't understand that stuff, we are never going to understand what is going on in the rest of that novel. Okay? Dialogue. Everybody knows what dialogue is, so I'm not going to talk about it. 1402, plot. Real easy. What's plot? What's the plot? How many of you have read the Harry Potter novels? A few of you. Okay? What's the overall basic plot? Well, let me say not the novels, the films. It's probably more of you have seen the films than the novels. And the plot in the films is different than the plot in the novels. From film 1 to film 8, what's the plot? What does Harry try to do? According to some, at least, it's revenge. He's got to get back at Lord Voldemort because Lord Voldemort killed his parents and tried to kill him. It's not the plot in the novels. Okay? So you can break that down. How? Well, what happens? First book, first chapter, The Boy Who Lived. Harry Potter gets dropped off as a baby on his aunt and uncle's doorstep. So the plot is how an author arranges the incidents of a story. Similarly, you could take plot, take it out of the realm of literature or fiction, take it to real life. Let's say, how could you write a plot of the 2016 presidential election? Take all the primaries out, just the two primary candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Well, you could go back to when they each announced their running for president. And you could plot out what they did after that. I mean, you could literally go, June 2015, Donald Trump rides down the escalator and announces. Or whatever time it was, Hillary Clinton announces. And then what? They go through the primaries and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So it's how things are arranged. Okay? Subplot. You have an overarching plot, and then the subplot. Overarching plot, let's take the election again. Donald Trump announces for president. What are subplots? What must he do from the moment of announcing to running for president as the candidate of the Republican Party? He's got to defeat everybody else first, right? Those are subplots. So what does he do? Low energy jab. He starts creating nicknames for people, whittling them down to size. Those are subplots. Okay? Overarching plot in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the play we're going to be not talking about today. The overarching plot is the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta coming in 4 days. Then you get little subplots after that. 4 lovers. Okay? Fairy lovers, Titania and Oberon, etc. Those kind of branch off from this overarching plot. Protagonist, antagonist. We tend to think protagonist means the hero of a story, or the hero of a tale, or the main character of a tale. Protagonist literally, however, means chief sufferer, or first sufferer. The person who endures the most. Why? Because the term comes from Aristotle, and when Aristotle wrote about drama, he was writing primarily about tragedies. And it's in tragedies where you see people suffer. And the person who suffered the most, that becomes the tragic hero. Okay? So, who's the protagonist of the Harry Potter novels? Harry Potter. It's not Lord Voldemort. Harry suffers the most. Harry doesn't die at the end. Lord Voldemort does. Sorry if I blew that for anybody. Okay. Antigone, a play by Sophocles that we will be reading. We'll talk about who's the protagonist. Because some people say it's Antigone, the person the play is named after. Many others say, no, it's not. It's her uncle, who suffers a lot more than she does. Okay? Antagonist, the person who is opposed to the protagonist. The antagonist in Harry Potter is Lord Voldemort. The antagonist, the ultimate antagonist, in The Lord of the Rings is not Gollum. It's Sauron. The antagonist in, the election of 2016, well, that depends on who your protagonist is, which depends on your particular political persuasion. If you're Hillary Clinton or a Hillary Clinton supporter, the antagonist is Donald Trump. If you're a Trump supporter, the antagonist is Hillary Clinton or everybody else, depending on what day of the week it is, kind of thing. Stage directions are pretty clear. Where do you enter? What do you do? Stage directions are usually unclear to the audience because they don't see the script. And some stage directions can be extremely complex. Okay? Some authors don't just say, so-and-so bends over and picks up a piece of paper. They go on for paragraphs to create the mindset for the actor, okay, of what the actor ought to be doing. You'll see this when we get to Hamlet. Hamlet actually acts like a director of a little play, and he tells the actors how to do their lines. For most people, that's Shakespeare, the author of the play, telling the actors, don't screw up my play. Okay? 1403, pyramidal pattern, rising action, climax, all that kind of stuff. What's this talking about? Pyramidal action is this kind of portrayal. The play begins here, it ends here. This is the moment of climax. So what do we have? We have the exposition and complication over here. Okay? So the necessary background information, and then the conflict is given. Okay? And it rises. Suspense builds. Climax occurs. The central point of tension in the play. Okay? And then everything down here is the resolution, or the French word, the denouement. Okay? So it rises and it falls. This is generally the portrayal of tragedy. Okay? Everything starts off kind of even keel at the beginning, and then the pressure cooker is turned on. And you see people doing things, climax reaches, and it all unravels. You could use the same kind of image, flip it upside down, however, for comedy. Starts off here, everything's fine, and then what happens? In comedy, there's a rupture in society. Well, there's also a rupture in society here. But in comedy, the rupture's healed. It's solved. In tragedy, it's not necessarily solved. People have to die for it to be resolved. In comedy, people don't die. They all live happily ever after, essentially. Okay? So you've got crisis terms I just discussed. Foil, bottom of 1403. What's a foil? Two terms, actually. Okay? Can be a support character, but it's a support character who brings out certain attributes of the main characters. Okay? So, for example, in trying to think of something that I'm sure everybody is familiar with. In the Star Wars universe, most of you have seen Star Wars or you've heard of it. Who is a foil for Luke? Who brings out some of Luke's better tendencies? Obi-Wan does. Okay? But Obi-Wan does by teaching Luke, by training Luke. That's the teacher mentor as opposed to a real foil. Who's somebody else who does? Who are the main characters who interact with Luke? Han Solo, Leia, and Han. How do Han and Luke differ? Luke's a Jedi, Han's not. What does that mean? What does Luke ultimately learn to put his quote-unquote faith in? The Force. You remember that one scene from the first film? Okay. They've left Tatooine. They're on the Millennium Falcon, and Luke is being trained by Obi-Wan. And he's got his lightsaber and the little floating sphere thing. He's shooting little, laser thingies at him. And Obi-Wan tells him, you got to trust in the Force, Luke. Here, put on this blast shield. But I can't see it, And what does Han say? Hokey religion and old weapons are no match for a good blaster. Put it in our parlance, swords and hokey religion's no match for what? A good Uzi. You got an Uzi with you, it's going to solve most of your problems. Nobody's going to hurt you. Okay? But what do we see? Luke lets go of that kind of mentality. And he is able to fend off a couple of the blasts. Han Solo calls that luck. Okay? So there's a little aspect where Han brings out, not intentionally, but just by his brash unbelief, the other side of Luke. Where else do we see that kind of? Who else is a foil for Luke? How about Darth Vader? Okay. He's both foil and antagonist. The antagonist usually is a foil. The antagonist usually does bring out the best of the protagonist. Okay? Theme, everybody knows what that is. Central idea or meaning of whatever the thing is, whatever the play, novel, poem, etc. is. Okay, so that's background of drama. Jump forward to page 1534. We've got 25 minutes. Maybe we will get into a little bit of Shakespeare, but I doubt it. So, a study of William Shakespeare. I'm going to leave aside temporarily. I take that back. Actually, page 1536. This is kind of the background of Shakespeare. Okay? There's where to put that marker? 3 main periods of drama or plays. You've got the ancient world, that is Greek and Roman. Okay. Then you essentially have the Renaissance, roughly, this is very rough, 1500 to about 1700. And then you have the modern period. Again, roughly 1900 to now. Okay? Some of this you'll learn when we talk about the Sophocles stuff, which we're going to do after Shakespeare. The reason I've kind of changed the order of it a little bit is the National Shakespeare Festival is putting on a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream for the next 3 weeks. I've been doing it since early August. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to get extra credit by going and watching a production, their production of the play, and telling me how their production of the play differs, how they alter the text of the play, what they skip, what they add, what they rearrange, that kind of thing. Right? And I'm going to post that maybe today. Drama arises as a religious ritual in the ancient world. Okay? Starts off as part of the religious festivals of ancient Greece. And then it gradually grows. It starts off just one person. And the person just goes out there and kind of monologues it for a while. And then another playwright introduces a second actor. So now you can have dialogue. Okay? Then we get 3. Now you can have real full-blown drama. Okay? That lasts from the beginnings, we don't know when the beginnings of drama are, to the end of the Roman period, roughly about 400 AD. And then drama dies. I mean, it is gone, dead, all right? And sometime around 1000 AD or so, it kind of resurrects. Guess where it starts again? In the church. In the medieval English church. It starts in the services for Easter weekend. And it starts with somebody in the church stands up and reads the lines in Latin from the gospel when the three Marys run to the tomb of Christ on the day of his resurrection, and they meet a gardener, and they say, "Where have you laid our Lord?" Where is he? Because he's not there. That's the beginnings. And the guy responds, "Well, you've got drama right there." Because eventually that starts getting acted out. Costumes are brought in. Okay? And so you get in the Middle Ages, that's the origin of drama for kind of this period. It then develops and you get three major kinds of drama. Page 1536. I think this, no, not 1536 is where this is. Is that where it's mentioned? No. 1538. Okay. In the third paragraph, you have mystery plays, miracle plays, and morality plays. Okay. In the Middle Ages in England. Mystery plays dramatize stories from the Bible, such as creation, fall of Adam and Eve, the crucifixion, and some of the plays are simply called the flood, the crucifixion, the creation, the fall of Adam and Eve. Okay? You've got miracle plays based on the lives of the saints, one about Abraham and Isaac, one about Noah, a whole bunch about Mary Magdalene and other saints. Okay? And then morality plays. And morality plays are allegories. Allegory is a form of symbolism, okay, where you have a 1-to-1 correspondence between the symbol and the thing the symbol represents. Okay? Here's an example. You go into a building today and you see something that looks like this. I'm going to give you a poor drawing. And you've got this and a line through it. What's that mean? No guns allowed. Similarly, it could be something like this. No smoking. That is, this never means guns allowed. Right? This never means smoking is permitted. Or, I love the priests. It always means, and only means, no guns allowed. Right? You could call that allegory. We would call that a sign, however. But an allegory, the thing that is used to represent something always and only represents that thing. So, for example, this always and only represents Christianity. It's never taken to refer to Jews. Why? Because you have the Star of David for that. Okay? The American flag only represents the United States. It never represents, let's go back a few years, the hammer and sickle. Okay? The symbol of the Soviet Union. All right? So that's allegory. Allegory, you're not allowed to misread what the symbols represent. In allegory, the person who writes it is acting like God and telling you, dummy, this is how you must read this. You can only read this way. One of the greatest allegories in the English language is a novel written in the 17th century by John Bunyan called Pilgrim's Progress. In that novel, a pilgrim named Christian is on his way to the celestial city. Christian can never be read for Muslim. Doesn't work. Okay? He's always and only Christian. Nothing else. Okay? What else? Page 1539, got a couple of terms. An aside and a soliloquy. An aside is when a character on stage looks to the audience and says something that the characters on stage aren't supposed to hear. We're going to see one when we get to Hamlet. Hamlet's going to be talking with his uncle / stepfather. Okay? And his uncle says something, and Hamlet's going to look to the audience and say, a little more than kin, but less than kind. And what he's doing there is he's slamming his uncle / stepfather, if you understand what Hamlet means by the words kin and kind. Okay? Soliloquy occurs when an actor is alone on stage and speaks. When that actor is alone on stage, and I mean alone, there is nobody else on the stage, then we are getting inside that character's mind. We are hearing essentially what that character thinks. In a soliloquy, the character never lies to us, because people don't tend to lie to themselves. Okay? And your introduction then goes on to say, Hamlet's to be or not to be is the most famous example of a soliloquy. No, it is not. Why? When Hamlet delivers that speech, there is another person on the stage. Because according to the stage directions of the play, one of the people who is on the stage has not left when Hamlet enters. In fact, she does not leave. She is on the stage the whole time. Now, Hamlet might be over here, and she might be way over in that corner. But Ophelia is still on the stage, which kind of throws wrinkles into our understanding of that speech, whether or not it's truly soliloquy and such. Okay? So, Shakespeare's drama. I'll do this quickly and then talk about some of this background stuff. So Shakespeare writes a variety of kinds of plays. Histories, comedies, tragedies. The histories are English history. Even though he writes, about Julius Caesar, he's not writing the history of Caesar. The histories are only English history. Okay? Tragedies kind of span the gamut. You got Roman tragedies, you've got old British tragedies, you've got Germanic tragedies, you've got Italian tragedies, etc. And then the same with comedies. The comedies are set in a variety of places. Some in England, some in Italy, some in France, some in Greece, etc. 1542. Comedy is a strong element in Henry IV, but the play's overall tone is seriousness. Okay, so what is comedy? Remember what I said over here. In a comedy, you have a disrupture or a rupture in society that is resolved at the end. It is resolved pleasingly, happily. For example, Midsummer Night's Dream. Where's the rupture? Where's the problem at the beginning of the play if you started reading it? Well, this gentleman named Aegeus enters the play fairly shortly after its beginning and says to the Duke of Athens, here's my daughter, I want her to marry this man, whose name is Demetrius. She says, however, I don't want to marry Demetrius, I want to marry Lysander. Lysander and I are in love. I'm not in love with Demetrius, I don't want to marry him. And the Duke says, you got to marry him. It's the law. The law says You belong to your father. Your father tells you to do this. Your father should be as a god to you, meaning you should obey him, etc. Well, what if I don't? Well, then the law will take effect. And the law is one of three things will happen. One, you die. That is, we will kill you for not obeying your father. A little extreme, I understand. Okay? What's another option? You do marry him. And the third option is you swear off the company of men entirely for the rest of your life, and you become a nun to the goddess Diana, the goddess of chastity and virginity and no sex. And he says, think of yourself. Think of your blood. He's saying, think how horny you are. Can you really do that? There's the rupture in society. A young girl is told in 4 days' time you either have to marry a man you don't love, die, or stay a virgin the rest of your life. Now, that could easily turn very sour, right? That could easily become a tragedy, a.k.a. Romeo and Juliet. But it doesn't. It gets resolved by the end of the play. Okay? That's a romantic comedy. Midsummer Night's Dream. Romantic comedies always involve some kind of problem in love. As the character Hermia puts it in Midsummer Night's Dream, star-crossed love. Well, we have star-crossed love in Romeo and Juliet, but that's not a romantic comedy, that's a romantic tragedy. Okay? Satire. Satire is, well, you know it. How many of you ever read or ever heard of The Onion online? Or Babylon Bee, which takes, stuff from a Christian perspective and really pokes fun at things. Either Saturday Night Live. What's the purpose of satire? What's the purpose, supposedly, of Alec Baldwin dressing up like Donald Trump and doing silly stuff? It's ridicule, but satire has one other element. Okay, keep going. It's to reform behavior. It's to ridicule, to tell the person being ridiculed, you're an ass. Change. Change your ways. Don't be a moron. Okay? Satire is always designed to get the person or society or group being satired to change. Okay? Parody is not. Parody is just making fun of somebody or something. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a parody of medieval romance stories of knights and daring-do going off to rescue, frail maidens and secure the Holy Grail, etc. But in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's not the Holy Grail, but it becomes the Holy Hand Grenade, etc., etc. Okay? Shakespeare, you've got page 1543, high comedy, low comedy. Most of you have probably never seen couple of the great examples of low comedy, because it's like they're almost completely out of our national consciousness anymore. The Three Stooges are masters of low comedy. Whenever Moe pokes his fingers into Curly's eyes or Larry's eyes, that's an example of low comedy. Back in the 70s, when Chevy Chase was one of the stars of Saturday Night Live, when he would enter and trip, that's an example of low comedy. Whenever somebody is hurt, okay, by tripping, by falling, by being punched, by having their eyes poked or hair pulled, that's low comedy. High comedy is verbal comedy. It's when you've got really fast conversation going on and the people are just delivering one-liners, one after another. Robin Williams is high comedy. If you've ever seen it, if you've never seen it, get online and watch some of there were 2 or 3 performances of Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters together. Jonathan Winters was the Robin Williams of the late 1950s and early 60s. who would just, somebody mentioned something, and he would just go off on a tear. The two of them together is like, I don't know, dropping acid, cocaine, and heroin all at once and just letting everything go. Because they go so fast. Or Robin Williams and Billy Crystal just go so fast at each other, you've got to slow the tape down in order to catch everything. Okay? Shakespeare uses both in his plays. Why? What's one of the purposes for using both? Who's going to catch the high comedy? The verbal dexterity. The smarter people. Not necessarily just the nobles, but people who, have something going on up here. Who's going to like the low comedy? The dumb people, essentially. Which in Shakespeare's day primarily is the people standing in the yard, what are called the groundlings. Okay? They like the stuff when somebody gets punched or slapped or tripped, etc. Similarly, they like the dirty jokes. Shakespeare has dirty jokes that are high comedy. He has dirty jokes that are low comedy. The dirty jokes that are high comedy are the ones that are really funny. And if you see Midsummer Night's Dream, hopefully you'll catch it. It's in the play within the play. Okay? At the end of the play. What else? Farce, exaggerated, improbable can't say that word, incongruities. Tragedy, as I've said, ends how? It doesn't end they all lived happily ever after. It ends in discontentment. Guess what happens to Hamlet? He dies. Guess what happens to Julius Caesar? He dies. Guess what happens to Othello? He dies. Richard III, he dies. Pretty much, if a tragedy is named after somebody, that person dies. If a comedy is named after somebody, that person lives. They get what they want out of life, essentially. Okay? So, that's background. We have 4 minutes. Shakespeare. He's born on or around April 23rd, 1564. He dies on April 23rd, 1564. We say on or around because we don't have an actual birth certificate. We have a baptismal certificate, which is close enough to that date that we generally say, okay, that's when he's born and died. Interesting thing about that is April 23rd is the patronal feast day of St. George. St. George is the patron saint of England. It's kind of a nice serendipity that the greatest writer in the English language is born and dies on the patronal feast day of that language, so to speak. Okay? He marries Anne Hathaway in November of 1582. Notice, he's 18. She's 26, by the way, which in Elizabethan England means she's old. She's a spinster. She's not married by 26. She ain't getting married. Okay? From 1582 to February 1583 is when she delivers their first child. Daughter Susanna. Yeah, do the math. It's only 3 months, folks. There's a reason they're getting married. She's 6 months pregnant. Okay? Their twins are then born 2 years later. Hamnet and Judith. Hamnet dies late 1590s or right at 1600. I think your introduction gives you, where is it? 1596, Hamnet dies. Shakespeare's only son. His 2 daughters go on and live. Okay? So from 1585 to 1592 are frequently called the lost years, or the dark years. Why? Because after these 2 are born, and Shakespeare, I think this is one of his signatures, signs the birth certificate, we know nothing about him until 1592. It's like he drops off the face of the earth. We literally have no evidence of where he is, what he's doing. But in 1592, there's reference to him already being in London. We don't know when he arrived in London. Some scholars suggest he went to London late 1580s, maybe as early as 1588. Okay? And then he's in London, he's writing plays, writing poems, making a name for himself, because by 1592, he has made a name for himself. He's attracted the ire of at least one dying hack writer. A guy who, almost with his last breath, writes this little pamphlet where he's kind of accusing the world of being cruel because the world doesn't recognize his literary brilliance. And he has a couple of lines in there that are lifted from Shakespeare. And he talks about this upstart crow who feathers his writing and who imagines himself a great shake scene in a country. And everybody takes those two passages as being references to Shakespeare. Which means he didn't just arrive. He's been there probably at least a year. Okay? So from 1592, we assume, until 1603, Shakespeare is a member of what are called the Lord Chamberlain's men. The Lord Chamberlain is the second most important, powerful person in England, only behind the Queen. Okay? He is the patron to Shakespeare's acting company. That gives a measure of respectability to Shakespeare's acting company. Got to remember, at this point in time, actors don't have the reputations that we give actors today. I mean, generally, the American populace has relatively high attitudes towards Hollywood, per se. It's changing, thankfully. In this period, actors were lowlifes. Okay? So to have the Lord Chamberlain support you, that elevated you. When the Queen dies, and King James becomes king, King James becomes their patron. Elevates them even higher. Okay? We'll stop there because I'm a minute over. So if there's a quiz on Monday, background Shakespeare, background of drama, let's say.